Hey guys, it's Joe B. I'm continuing with that passenger fender. Well, first of all, as you can see, I've got my eye protection on, I got my mask, and then I've also got my earplugs for the sound, because we're using the grinder with the wire brush. This is probably the most aggressive brush I've ever used. It's for pure paint removal, but I'm also handling the rust and the paint on the interior of the panel. So I've gone over this area, I've removed it. You can see the metal in a lot of places, and that's okay. It's more important to see the metal than the rust, alright? Keep that in mind, just use that as a tip. I'm also finding a lot of trouble areas, like it looks like there's some Bondo here, some filler that just was never sanded down right. Stuff like this doesn't have to be perfect, okay? It's to your own discretion, your own preference about how much time you want to spend here. But the most important thing is if you check the surrounding areas and you're seeing paint, then you're in good shape. If you check the surrounding areas like right here and you're still seeing some rust, you've got work to do. So I've been removing all the rust on the surface. It's just surface rust on the inner areas. I'm going to leave the areas that have the tar. In the 70s they used this tar to protect against rust and to protect the surface. So the tar is fine. You can leave that. I also found a line of Bondo filler on the inside here, which I used the wire brush to grind down, and it looks like everything under it was okay. So I'm just going to make sure that that's flat and reasonable, and then we'll end up coating that. You will have to use some sandpaper by hand in order to get little spots like right in here. And then either that and or use rust reformer, spray over that to seal it. And we're also going to have to do it right here. Anything that you get down to bare metal, for example right here, I cleaned all this off. Got all the surface rust off of this, it's down to bare metal. When you get to the bare metal on an inside panel, you can just use some rattle-can primer just to cover it and seal it. That is, of course, after you do your wax and grease remover, because especially with the tar situation I've got going on here, I still have some areas to check. There's going to be a lot of tar that needs to be removed. So we're going to have to be very aggressive with the remover. I also was very aggressive with the brush in this area to clean a lot of surface rust here. And when it's complete, I am going to use the primer, the rattle-can primer, to seal that. I will have to weld this area right here. I can probably go without it, but I'm going to throw a couple of quick tacks on there just to keep that from increasing in size, because it looks like there's just a little crink there. In fact, this whole fender looks like at one point, I don't know if during installation or maybe it had taken a little bump, but it looks like it had, sorry, I'm trying to get the camera clean here. It looks like it had flexed this way, where the front had gone in this direction and this had maintained its position. So I may have to flex that, and if I do need to do that, I want everything to be welded and solid. The front bucket looks good. I cleaned up this area here, and I just went over the surface here. You can see the original grabber blue here, where that's the original color from the factory, which I don't know if I'm going to go with that color. I think I'm going to go with something a little bit more modern than the grabber blue, and I still have work to do here. They didn't use the, there's a grommet, there's a line, a rubber line that you use to seal the end caps, and they didn't use it, so metal against metal rubbed, and it created a line of surface rust here, which I will clean up. And I also have to make sure that this looks like a crink here. I'm going to have to hammer this out and make sure that it's correct. That's probably why that wasn't bolted in the first place. Anyway, this is the underside, and this can be done to your preference. Does not have to be completely perfect because no one's ever going to see it. So you clean it up, get it down to metal where you have rust, use your rust reformer in spots you can't reach, use your primer to cover the metal, and then after that you can use like a rubberized coating or even a matte black or whatever you want to do, but it does not have to be your expensive paint. Alright, this is Joe B continuing with the passenger fender. Hey guys, it's just about an hour later. Joe B with the Mach 1 passenger fender. I finished with the rust removal and the prep work all along where you put the bolts to the body here. Those 6 bolts. Looks like this had been welded at some point and it was still in really good shape. I could grind it down here, but leaving the bead is actually a little bit stronger than if I didn't, so I left it. The places that I had to prep, I threw a tack on here, ground it down, and threw a tack on here, ground it down, and I threw that tack on here and ground it down. So those are all clean. Next thing is I'm going to wash the panel again with the detergent, the wax and grease removal. I'm going to scrub it with a brush. It looks like a giant toothbrush, just for like washing car rims and stuff. So I'll wash it with that, and then I'll lay it in the sun, and then we will begin the next step, which is the rattle-can primer and body fill any spots. I'll probably also flip it over, and I'll use the 180 DA in order to get down to metal and use filler on anything that needs to be taken care of there. This is Joe B with the Mach 1 passenger fender. This is Joe B with the Mach 1 passenger fender, and I just wanted to give a quick update. In places where, I'm not doing the whole back this way, but in places right in here where I can't even reach with the sandpaper, or in these holes where it gets really difficult, I'm using rust reformer. You spray it on direct metal, the less rust the better, but when you spray it on and it starts to convert the rust into this black sandable primable surface, it locks it in. So in places where you really can't get up in there, right up in this area here, way up in there, it gets a little bit difficult. You hit it with the rust reformer, and that'll help to keep your surfaces solid so that you can actually get a good substrate on there to start with your primer and your base. This is Joe B with the Mach 1 passenger fender. Okay guys, it's Joe B. This is just the next step in the process on working on the back of the panel. So with the passenger fender, I had already finished with the rust reformer, and then I covered all the exposed metal areas with some rattle-can primer. This is going to make sure that it's protected. I won't have any rust problems. No rust will be forming. I didn't have to cover any of the areas that had tar on it because I'm going to leave that tar there. That's fine as a protectant on the inside of the fender. But anywhere else where I had exposed metal, I covered it with rattle-can. And then you can leave this in this state until you either hit it with a really decent grit, 180, 220, and then use your nice primer on it. But what I'm going to do is just leave it as is, and ultimately hit it with just some rubberized coating. The undercoating on the bottom will be just fine for the back of the panel. But it's all clean, especially up in there. It's looking really good. So the reformer rattle-can, perfectly fine for the inside of the fender. This is Joe B, Mach 1 passenger fender.